Always like to start by asking everyone how you are today. What's the vibe? I'm doing pretty well today myself. I was able to do some meditation and some journaling and do some kind of productive things, do some emails and kind of biz stuff like that. And I've been looking forward to this. So it's been a good day so far. How about you guys? Mutant Lola is annoyed. Ugh, I'm sorry. Sometimes that happens. Hopefully it will be something that will sort of pass. Anya, hi. Good to see you too. I love seeing some people that I know showing up. I've known you for so long. You were one of the first people I met in the tarot community. It feels like a million years ago. Hey guys. Hey everyone joining in. Yeah, I was just asking, like, how's everybody doing? How are we doing? Hopefully we're doing okay. Hi from Iowa. Hello. Thank you for being here. Okay, let's see. How are we doing on time? Let's give it maybe like 1 more minute. See, 1 more minute for people to join in live. Someone says, A. Perry says, doing well, kind of a slow, sleepy day so far. I'm glad you're here for this today because I think it's the perfect thing to take in on kind of a slow day, because it's sort of been my intention with all of these Instagram lives that I've been doing for the past month I want them to be useful and beneficial, but I also want them to be a reprieve for you guys from some of the more stressful parts of life. And with the fact that today we're talking about tender tarot, so using the cards when you feel kind of tender seems like perfect for when you're just having sort of a slow, sleepy day. Okay, so I think we are ready to go ahead and get started. It's been a few minutes. Hopefully people are here. Someone's almost ready for bed in Sweden. Oh yeah, well thanks for stopping by as your little evening sort of wind down session. Okay. All right, so we are ready to get started. Thank you to everyone who is here live. Thank you to those of you who watch this as a replay. Today we are going to be talking about working with tarot when you are feeling tender. I have been particularly looking forward to this session because it has been quite the damn year. I think for all of us, there has been a lot of tenderness over the past year. We've been dealing with some very big things collectively. So I think it's been a particularly important time for us to know when we need to be more gentle with ourselves, when we need to be more tender with ourselves. So I want to give a little bit of background about my style of tarot and how we came to be here in this session today. So over the years, especially since I wrote my blog posts on the Wild Unknown, which is how a lot of people find me, I've been saying I started those in 2015, but I just today realized I actually started them at the very end of 2014. So it's been a lot of years since I first wrote those posts, but over the years, people still visit those posts. They're still quite active. And I still to this day have a lot of people reach out to me and say that one of the things they appreciate the most in my interpretations there is it's often been described as more of sort of a gentle, tender tone that I take when I'm talking about tarot. I was sort of surprised the first few times people said this to me because it wasn't necessarily something that I always intentionally tried to cultivate, but I mentioned this I posted on my Instagram feed to let people know I'd be doing this tarot gathering today, and I mentioned I am an INFP on the Myers-Briggs, if anyone's familiar with the Myers-Briggs, and I am a Cancer sun, so I think it's kind of natural that I have more of that tone, more of that tender sort of tone. So that's a little background on me personally and my style. Now, what we're going to be focusing on mostly with our time together today will be particularly talking about when you are reading tarot for yourself. But I do think that a lot of this could be helpful as well if you are reading for other people, but just know that mostly I'll be talking about this from a framework of when you're reading tarot for yourself. Okay. Let's start by talking about what are we even really describing when we talk about feeling tender. So the most important thing with this is I think you need to know yourself. So to me, when I talk about feeling tender, I'm talking about anything ranging from maybe I'm just kind of having a bad day, maybe I'm feeling a little sensitive, maybe I'm feeling a little hormonal, or it could range to I'm dealing with some deeper things. I do personally struggle with anxiety, so sometimes that's part of the tenderness for me. But as I am often saying in these sessions, and the reason I think it's so important to know yourself is it's not always appropriate to turn to tarot if you're feeling tender in a way in which you are actually actively in crisis, in whatever way. If you're in a mental health crisis, if you're in any type of state where you know that you need maybe professional help or you need something that is not tarot. So that's just something I always like to say as a disclaimer. I never want to make it seem like tarot can be a replacement for if you need medication, if you need therapy, if you know, all of these kinds of things. But I do think that when you know yourself and when you're feeling tender in a certain paradigm, working with tarot can be something that can feel very healing. It can feel very calming. It can feel very nurturing. So that's the focus of what we're talking about today. Okay, let's see. I'm just looking at my notes, as always. All right, so I already sort of started to mention this, but let's go into more of a definition of what does it mean to read tarot tenderly. The core things that I think about are reading in a way that is calming to yourself and that is centering to yourself. Now, this is a big thing that I posted about this I made an Instagram reel about this not long ago, and I know some other people have been talking about this lately as well, but I want to make it really clear that I'm not talking about just being positive. There's been a lot of people talking about like toxic positivity. So when I talk about reading tarot in a tender way, I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm not talking about sugarcoating things. I'm not talking about spiritual bypassing. The thing that I always bring my focus back to, and I have for many years, is how can I read for myself in a way that is useful? I really like that word useful instead of framing it as, reading in a positive way or reading in a negative way, because you can still read for yourself with a tender approach and sometimes still maybe have to face some things that are a little bit difficult, a little bit pokey, but you want it to come forward in a way that's really useful, not a way that's going to scare you away or a way that's going to turn into like blame or shame or just like everything's dark and gloom. So hopefully you see what I'm saying with that. Okay, let's see here. Another couple of things I wanted to mention. And that kind of going back to me personally, I mentioned I have a Cancer sun. I have a Virgo moon, and I'm always saying I'm a perpetual astrology newbie, but I think the fact that my moon is in Virgo is why I really like that word useful. I want things to be useful. I want things to be helpful. I want things to be meaningful. So I think it comes from that. That could be something you could think about for yourself as you're figuring out how you can read for yourself in a tender way, is tap into what you already know about yourself. And that could come from what you know of your astrological chart. It could come from what you know if you've like gone through therapy or anything like that. But what do you know about yourself? What do you know about your sort of strengths, and how can those be utilized and channeled in a way that works really usefully for you when you're feeling tender? I hope that makes sense. Kristen, you have a Virgo moon too? That's awesome. Okay, let's see here. Where are we? Okay. So let's keep going. Let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's go through some actual steps and some things you can use to go through the process of actually reading for yourself when you are feeling tender. I think this all begins with your deck selection. Oh, I feel like the clouds always come out when I try to go live. So hopefully you guys can still see me okay. But yeah, I think it starts with your deck selection. I've talked about this a number of times over the years, and most tarot readers that I've interacted with online feel the same way as well, which is different decks present themselves to us with a different sort of flavor, a different sort of personality. And this is very individual. So what feels like a gentle, tender deck for me might be different than what that feels like for you. But that is the first thing I would recommend thinking about. Is the way that I've described it in the past is choose a deck that feels like a gentle hug. There are certain decks, like I've mentioned this a few times lately, but the Wild Unknown for me has a very kind of cold, harsh tone most of the time. So when I'm feeling tender, that's probably not a deck I would turn to. So think about your decks and think about which ones you already know have that more gentle tone for you. Hi, Shona. So fun seeing people I know coming in. A lot of people have told me that the deck that I co-created, the Spacious Tarot, is a deck that they often turn to when they're feeling tender, which I'm very honored by that. It, probably surprising no one, has pretty much gone to the top of my list as well, that's often a deck that I will work with when I'm feeling tender. Another one that I personally really like is the Gaian Tarot. So think about decks that you have that feel very centering, very calming, and that's sort of the first step, is making sure you're working with a deck that is going to be helpful for you in this process. Okay. All right, so this was kind of just an interesting synchronicity that I mentioned this in one of the lives like a week or two ago, but I've recently hit my 7-year anniversary of blogging, of doing readings for other people, which is wild, but very exciting. And one of the things I've done a little bit of in kind of celebrating that milestone, I guess, is looking back at some of the blog posts and some things I've created over the years. And just within the past couple of days, I was looking back at a course I created for Tarot Summer School, which is something hosted by Ethany. I think she still does it every summer. She brings together like a big group of tarot readers and everyone puts together a course. It was really fun. So I did that about 4 years ago. I taught a course in Tarot Summer School called Tarot for Empaths. I've been revisiting that course just over the past few days. The reason I say it was a synchronicity is because some of the things that I talked about in that course, I was like, wow, these are perfect for the fact that I'm going to be talking about tender tarot this week. I think pretty soon I'm going to look into how I can make that course available again. So I'll keep you posted. It'll be somewhere on my Instagram feed when I figure that out. But it's been in the archive ever since I offered it 4 years ago. And looking back at it, I was like, oh, there's actually some things in here I still really like. So a couple of things I'm going to mention today are things that I mentioned in that course. All right, so we talked about starting by selecting a gentle deck. And the next thing I want to mention, just sort of briefly, this is something I go pretty in depth on in that course I mentioned, Tarot for Empaths, which is practicing non-reactive empathy with yourself. So essentially there are different types of empathy. There's reactive empathy and there's non-reactive empathy. I go really in depth in the course. So if you're interested, keep an eye out. I'll make that course available again soon. But in sort of a nutshell overview, reactive empathy is when you're in, well, I guess it's when you're reactive. It's when you're so in the thick of something that you can't necessarily even have a little bit of mental space available. Oh, I've got things falling over there. My yoga mat just tipped over. So fun. I thought it was a ghost. Maybe it is. Who knows? Anyways, so where was I? I lost my train of thought. Damn you, ghost. Damn you, losing my train of thought. I think I was talking about reactive empathy, but yeah, when you're in a reactive state, you're so immersed in what you're feeling that you don't even have a teeny bit of mental space available to you to step back into a place of non-judgment, to maybe see a little bit of a difference between, there's a lot of ways to think about this, but one way I sometimes think about it is sort of my scared self and maybe my higher self, and my higher self holds and contains my scared self, but you really need to know when you're in that reactive place, because I wouldn't go as far as saying you should never try to read tarot when you're feeling very reactive, but you probably 9 times out of 10 will not get the level of depth and centering and meaning that you can get if you're able to be in a place of non-reactive empathy. Someone says they love the idea of non-reactive empathy. I love it as well. When I first came across this concept, I was like, mind blown. This is amazing. So non-reactive empathy, again, I go deeper into this in the Tarot for Empaths course, but non-reactive empathy is sort of what it sounds like. I describe it in the course as, I'm not a Buddhist, so I hope I'm not getting this terribly wrong, but I think it has some similar themes to the Buddhist concept of non-attachment, which is where you're able to sort of realize that everything is fleeting. Emotions, in tarot, emotions are the cup suit, so the water element, and so that you're able to not be as identified with that emotional experience. That's more of the non-reactive empathy. So as much as you possibly can, ask yourself how you can practice non-reactive empathy for yourself when you are feeling tender. Some of the things we're going to talk about from here, I hope will give you some more specific frameworks for how you might do that. All right. Okay. So the next things we're going to go through, someone says radical acceptance. Yeah, I think there's probably some similar underlying themes in all of these things. Okay, now we're going to go through 3 practices, or you could think of these as 3 somewhat meditative frameworks that you can work with when you are reading for yourself in a tender way. The first thing that I would recommend is before you even, so you've picked the deck, but before you even start pulling any cards, think about maybe someone you know. So this could be a friend, it could be even a child, it could be even someone, maybe you don't personally know them, but like you are aware of them, but someone you know who has a really like centering, loving, welcoming, non-judgmental energy to them. The reason I was kind of laughing and saying it could be someone you don't actually know is because lately I've been thinking about Yoga with Adrienne. I'm sure a lot of you know her, but I love doing her videos, which I know a lot of people do. So she's an example of someone that I sometimes think of as a tone that's very loving, that's very non-judgmental. So think of someone, and as you're going through the reading, you can refer to that person's sort of energy as something that you want to embody, something that you want to move through you as you are interpreting the cards for yourself. You could even do this with, someone says Adrienne is such a cutie. She really is. Like, she's always doing her videos, always helps me kind of come back to center and calm down. So she's an example. You can also even do this with a tarot card. Some of you might remember, if you've been following me, Tara Brach, I don't know how to say her name. I think I've come across her before. She teaches about meditation and things like that. I can't remember the details, but anyways, yeah, so someone like that, right? Okay, you could even do this with a tarot card. Some of you might remember, if you've been following me for a while, I used to occasionally do this thing on my Instagram feed, and I actually called it Tough or Tender Tarot. And the way that I would describe that is I would ask you, the person interacting with the post, to choose if you wanted more of a kind of tough love message or if you wanted more of a tender message. And I would say, if you choose tough, I will channel my inner emperor. And if you choose tender, I will channel my inner empress. So that's just one example, but you might think of the empress, or maybe there are a lot of different tarot cards you could use. Sometimes for me, it's the Page of Cups, and referencing to the energy of that card as this is the type of energy I want to move through me as I'm interpreting these cards for myself when I'm feeling tender. So that's the first kind of practice that you can try. The second thing is to set an intention for your time with the cards. This is actually something I do in any reading, even when I'm not consciously saying, okay, I'm going to read tenderly for myself. I think I even talk about this in Foundational Tarot, which is a free course I created that you can get access to by signing up for my mailing list at carriemallon.com. If you're interested in that, it's about a 90-minute intro to tarot that I did about a year and a half ago. And I think I even talk about this in Foundational Tarot, which is setting an intention before you begin the reading. A lot of times I actually do it while I'm shuffling the cards. And usually for me, the intention I set, generally speaking, is just let me be guided to the cards and to the messages that are in alignment with my highest good. If I am particularly tender, I might kind of amend that to even add some things as let me be guided to the messages that will be calming, that will be centering, that will be nourishing, that will be useful, whatever you're feeling in that moment. But I know this is a little more on kind of the woo-woo side of things, but I have very much found in my experience, and your mileage may vary, but I really do feel that the universe responds to intentions. So if you approach that reading with the intention, I'm going to be reading in this style, I'm going to receive messages that can meet me where I am in this moment of tenderness, then usually you will receive those results. The universe will kind of meet you in the middle. So kind of a woo-woo, spiritual, whatever thing, but that's what works well for me. So you could try that. One of the reasons I think that this idea of setting an intention is so important is especially when you are feeling tender, depending on your unique psyche. But sometimes for me, when I'm feeling tender, part of that is I am a bit self-destructive, and I can even get into like some self-loathing things, which is really not what we want. So when you have that intention, I kind of mentioned some of these things earlier, but I don't want this reading to be about shaming myself or punishing myself or looking at all the ways that I'm messing up and why everything is my fault. Like, I really want this reading to open me up, to ground me, to center me, all of those kinds of things. Okay. The third framework, or the third sort of approach that I recommend is ask yourself, before you even begin pulling cards, how do I want to feel during my time with the cards today? This is another thing that I talked about in the Tarot for Empaths course. In that course, I gave the suggestion of choosing words to use as anchors as you are reading for yourself. And your words would be very personal to you. But the three that I gave as suggestions back when I created that course were curious, open, and compassionate. And that way, as you are going through the cards, as you are interpreting them for yourselves, again, you can use those words as a touchstone. How can I interpret this card in a way that's curious, that's compassionate, or whatever words resonate with you? But I think that combined with the idea of thinking about the energy of someone who you find to be a very soothing, a very kind person, those two things together can help to kind of just, again, I really like that word anchor, just sort of bring you back to your focus, bring you back to your center as you are interpreting the cards. Okay, so those are the three frameworks, or the three exercises, the three approaches, whatever, however you want to think of them. All right, okay, how are we doing so far? Oh my goodness, time is just flying by. Okay, it's very quiet, so I'll take that as we're doing okay. All right, okay, so let's go ahead and move on. The next thing that I want to talk about, okay, someone says amazing, I see hearts. Oh, great, okay, thank you so much for letting me know. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. The next thing I want to mention, now that we've gone through some general ideas and concepts and practices, is remember that when you are feeling tender, you do not have to do a traditional reading for yourself. You might want to do, and by traditional reading, I mean like shuffling, everything's face down, you have a spread, you lay out the cards, right? So that might be what you do. Maybe you pick a spread that has a lot of really nourishing, kind spread positions, but you don't have to do a traditional reading. Again, when we did the first tarot gathering here on Instagram Live a few weeks ago, I went over the 4 styles of reading tarot, and one of those styles is the magical style. And I mentioned that one of the reasons I love the magical style is it doesn't have to be about doing a reading. It can open and expand things up to using tarot in different ways. And when I am feeling tender is often a time I will turn to alternate ways of working with tarot that aren't just doing a standard reading. Also remember, like, even if you do choose to do more of a traditional reading for yourself, you can, and we already talked about choosing a deck that feels gentle for you, but you could even go as far as if there's certain cards that you just know, like, I'm not in a place to see this card right now, take those cards out of the deck. It's okay. You can just take, if you don't want the tower to come up right now, put the tower aside. It's okay. You can give yourself permission to do that. You can set the boundaries. You can set the parameters for this. It's also, someone had asked me last week when we were talking about reversed cards about oracle decks, and I mentioned that I don't work as much with oracle decks now, but when I'm feeling tender is one of the times that I am more likely to turn to an oracle deck, so you can even think about that. So really, just make it work for you, and kind of, you can always throw the rule books out with tarot, but it's a really good time when you're feeling tender. Kristen asked, do I review or suggest some gentle decks? The ones for me, I mentioned this earlier, but the ones that resonate the most with me right now as gentle are mine, the Spacious Tarot, and there's one called the Gaian Tarot. I don't have it next to me, but I find that to be a very sweet, very kind deck. Everyone will be different with what connects with them, but actually another one I was going to mention is the Way of the Panda Tarot. It is so cute and I love it. I don't like decks that are too sugar coaty or too I don't know, friffy, whatever. I'm not, but they can be very cute and very sweet and still be very deep and very meaningful. Those are the ones that I like the best. Yeah, someone says I'm taking 9 of Swords out with PMT. I'm not sure what PMT is, but yeah, get the 9 of Swords out of there. It's okay. You can do that when you're ready, because this is a whole different conversation, but I mentioned I used to do the tough or tender tarot readings, and I think being tough can be done in a way that's still sort of tender, but there are times when you might be like, okay, I know what I need now is more of a direct, a little more of an authoritative tone with my reading, and then you leave all the cards in the deck and you can still interpret them in a constructive way, but it's okay to do what you need to do when you are feeling tender. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is you could also do face up tarot when you're feeling tender. I love doing things with face up tarot. I really consider this part of the magical style of tarot, is doing any kind of exercise where, as opposed to shuffling, having everything face down and laying them out, you're actually consciously working with the cards, looking through them and selecting ones that you want to be with in that moment. There was a number of years ago, an amazing blogger and tarot practitioner called Siobhan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She had a website called Radical Tarot, and one of the things she used to do is these community tarot scopes where she would gather a bunch of different readers and everyone would contribute a tarot scope, so like a horoscope, using tarot cards. I contributed to it a few times. A lot of amazing readers contributed to it, and a long time ago, Siobhan used to write on the Little Red Tarot blog about face up tarot. Tarot. So if you want to go into the Little Red Tarot archives, there's some great posts from a number of years ago to give you some ideas about ways to work with face-up tarot. I am very intuitive with the way that I work with face-up tarot. I'll often just, in that moment, if I'm feeling tender, I'll kind of just think of and create a little exercise for myself. So you can do that, just think about like, what do you need? It can be as simple as, we talked about this in the 4 styles of reading tarot, but it could be as simple as like just picking a card you want to meditate with because you want to take on the energy of that card. Like maybe the star is one I often work with when I'm feeling tender. But I want to also give you a couple of examples of exercises you can do with face-up tarot. Okay. The first one, this is another interesting synchronicity that's happened to me lately, which is this just kind of popped into my head literally like half an hour ago when I was taking notes and thinking about what I wanted to talk about. This exercise just sort of came to me, and I'm going to share it with you in a moment, but I want to mention that after I thought about this one, I got out this book, which is the Tarot Activity book by Andy Matzner that I've mentioned a couple of times already, but this whole book is different activities you can do with tarot, and a lot of them are face-up tarot exercises, so this has a lot of good things for when you're feeling tender. And as I was going through this book, I was like, oh, there's an exercise in here that's almost identical to the one that I just thought of, so maybe I had seen that in the past and it was kind of buried in my subconscious, or maybe it's just like Andy and I were both tapped into the collective unconscious. Someone says they're listening, but that shirt, oh, thank you. I'm glad you like it. I got this so long ago and I almost got rid of it because I thought it didn't fit me anymore, but I found it today and I was like, I'm going to try that on. I was like, you know what? That's okay. It's not too snug. So thank you. Okay, anyways, so the exercise that I'm talking about that Andy and I kind of had a similar brainwave with is to go through your deck face up. And first of all, pick a card, or maybe it's multiple cards, that represent how you are feeling in that moment. What is the texture of the tenderness that you are experiencing? What are some of the nuances? What are some of the layers to the tenderness that you are experiencing? This works so well with tarot because tarot is visual. So sometimes when we're feeling tender, it's hard to put things into words, but as you're going through images, you might find, oh, that image really aligns with this tender experience that I'm having right now. So that's the first part is, what is the card or the cards that describe the tenderness that I'm experiencing? And then, let me see, I'm going to flip it open to this in the book because there was one difference in how Andy described it and how I described it. So let me see if I can find where it is in here. Oh, here it is. Okay. He calls the activity mood cards. And then, so Andy then just recommends, and I recommended this as well, now you go through your cards face up and pick a card or perhaps a few cards that speak to you about how you want to be feeling. So you have the card or cards that talk about the tenderness you're experiencing right now, and then you go through face up and select the card or cards that talk about where you want to move to, what it might look for you to find some type of healing or some type of reprieve or some type of deeper understanding in light of where you are right now. Where we differentiated is that was kind of the core of what Andy shared, and what I added in is to then go through your cards face up and find one or more cards that you would think of as your bridge. So how do you move through the space between the tenderness that you're experiencing right now and the deeper understanding or the feelings or whatever it is that you want to be experiencing? And I love this idea, not to toot my own horn, but I love this idea of picking the bridge card because I think that bridge card could be something you could maybe do some journaling with. You could even do, I think we talked about this a little bit was it last week? It was in one of these tarot gatherings that I've done recently. We just sort of quickly, I mentioned the idea of dialoguing with a tarot card. This is something that I heard of from Mary Kay Greer in her book, 21 Ways to Read a Tarot Card. So where you could actually sit with your bridge card and either through journaling or just through maybe visualizing this in your psyche, have a conversation with the card and ask, how can I take on your wisdom? How can I embrace this bridge that you are offering me? What can I do to meet myself where I am right now, but have your wisdom and your encouragement to guide me towards these cards over here that represent what I'm aiming towards, what I'm moving towards. Okay, Luna Nova Tarot says, what an amazing exercise for all these beautiful decks I have where the art speaks for me, but I don't use them that often. Yes, it's perfect for that. And that's sort of an added bonus, is it's a great way to bond with a tarot deck that maybe you don't turn to as often, because maybe there's certain cards you don't resonate, but there's others that you're like, these ones are beautiful. So thank you for mentioning that. Okay, so that was the first exercise that I wanted to share, and I think I'm going to share one more. Okay, yeah, so someone says, Andy's Journaling the Tarot book is also so good for that. Yes, that one's amazing. I've been I've showed that one. It's called Tarot for, oh wait, no, that's Journaling the Tarot is a different book, isn't it? I was going to say Tarot for Transformation. I think he actually has a whole book, Journaling the Tarot, which I don't have and I should get, because I think Andy's great and I really like Andy's books that I do have, which is this one in Tarot for Transformation. Okay, the other exercise that I'm going to share is another one from this book, another Andy Matzner. And let me see, I should have had these bookmarked, but I wrote it down somewhere. What page was this on? Oh, I actually did bookmark. I committed the sacrilege, depending on who you ask, of folding the page over. Okay, so this I'm going to share with you another exercise, face-up tarot exercise you can try when you're feeling tender. This one Andy calls meeting your advocate. So I'm just going to sort of read some of it and describe it to you from the book. Highly recommend the book if this is of interest to you. Okay, so Andy says the objective of this exercise is to meet someone or something that will give you encouragement when you need it. And so Andy goes on to describe the background of this. Your advocate is the part of your psyche whose job is to protect you from negativity. It can also give you comfort and uplifting support. Your advocate has your best interests at heart and is always in your corner. So I love this concept, and as you can tell, it's very sweet, very kind, would be a perfect thing to try when you are feeling tender. Andy describes your advocate could be anything, so you don't have to do this with tarot. You could do this with, Andy mentions, like even superheroes or an element of nature, whatever. But for this particular exercise, you're picking a tarot advocate. So for the process for this, again, you're going to go through your deck face up. And as you're doing so, you're going to tell yourself, I am looking for my advocate. I am looking for my protector. I am looking for someone or something that will support me and that cares for me unconditionally. And as you're sort of saying that to yourself as a mantra, you really want to trust your intuition of which cards you're being guided to. And this is another one where maybe you'll just pick one card, maybe you might want to pick several cards and narrow it down to one card, or maybe you decide you want to do it with several cards, but eventually you land on a place where you have maybe one, maybe a couple of cards that you are now working with and you now intuitively feel is your advocate. And Andy says the reason this is so powerful is now you have a representation of your advocate. You can carry this card around with you. You could do some meditationing. You could do some meditation with this card. Andy doesn't, I don't think, actually he does kind of talk about this, this idea of dialoguing with the card. So I want to read you this as well. Andy gives 3 questions that you can ask your advocate card and you can journal with. I really love Andy suggests writing the answers to these questions with your non-dominant hand, which I know is a common thing for tapping deeper into your intuition. So with your non-dominant hand, you have your advocate card. The first thing you ask is, do you have a name? And if so, what should I call you? And this is sort of a free writing thing where you really just want to let what comes forward come forward. You don't want to judge yourself. That's part of why writing with your non-dominant hand is helpful, because it can sort of get your barriers out of the way and let things flow through you in a deeper paradigm. And then the second question is, what is your message to me? So see what message your advocate card has for you. And then third, and I really love this, how can I best support and nourish you? I think that's just really lovely to think about when you are feeling tender and you're getting messages from your advocate, but you're also creating this co-supportive relationship with your advocate. Like, how can I best support and nourish you? How can your advocate also how can you support and nourish each other is what I'm trying to say with that. So I think that's really lovely. And then Andy goes on to mention that when you find yourself being battered by your inner critic in particular, you can turn to your advocate, ask your advocate to be there for you in support. And essentially you are then strengthening that part of your psyche, because that's really what your advocate is a part of your inner world, a part of your psyche. And so you're learning to further notice that, coax that out, and develop that. Okay, there is so much more we could talk about with this topic of tender tarot, but we've gone through some things that I hope will be helpful, I hope will be interesting, and I hope will be useful for you if you decide to give them a try. And I will now open it up if you have comments or if you have questions. If you're here live, feel free to let me know. And while I'm waiting to see if anyone has anything to say, I want to mention again that some of the things we talked about today are similar to what I talked about in that Tarot for Empaths course that I did about 4 years ago now. And I'm hoping to bring that course out of the vault, out of the archives soon. So if that's of interest, it's going to be very affordable. I haven't figured it out yet, but it will not be too expensive. Okay. I see some thank yous, so you are welcome. I'm glad that it's helpful for you. Anything else? Any questions or any comments or maybe if you guys have any ways that you work with tarot when you're feeling tender that you want to bring forward for us, you are welcome. A lot of thank yous. Yeah, I enjoyed this one, so I'm glad you guys enjoyed it as well. I hope that you can take some meaningful things forward. Let's see. Okay, I don't know. I think it's pretty quiet, so I guess we will go ahead and wrap it up, because I'm just seeing a lot of thank yous. Oh, here's Shona. Shona says, one thing I do, and sorry if you mentioned this and I missed it, is make sure I ask supportive questions like, what can I do? Ooh, I love that, Shona. I did not mention that in particular, but I think that is so important. That's a thing that I think is, of course, always important, but especially when we're feeling tender, framing questions in a way that is empowering. What can I do? I love that. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Someone says, the thing about tender and tough tarot is that it comes from compassion. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mentioned earlier that one of the things I talked about in the Tarot for Empaths course is choosing words to use as anchors to kind of keep coming back to as you're working with your cards. And one of them was compassion. So that's perfect. You're going to do tarot cards for the first time in a while. I hope it brings you something useful. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. If you were here live, if you watch the replay, I hope you get something beneficial from it as well. Take good care. And I wanted to mention, this is the last official one of these that I have planned. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to keep doing them. I think I'll probably keep doing them, but I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. So keep an eye on my Instagram feed and I'll let you guys know if we're doing it next week or not, because I don't know. But thanks for anyone who's come to any of these lives. It's been fun. It was a cool thing to try. So we'll see what the future holds. Okay. All right. Take care, everybody. Okay, bye. Right on time today. Hi, everyone. Hello, if you come and stop by to watch the replay, and I'll give it a minute for hopefully some folks to come in to our live session. Hi, guys. I see people joining in. Thank you for being here. Oh, Kristen. Hi, Kristen.